People that have defended your home against intruders. What is your story? When I was about 16 or so, my dad, brother and I were on the way home from church and saw that a truck we didn't recognize was parked in front of our house. We had a long driveway, so by the time we pulled up and parked, my dad had told my brother and I to stay in the car as he figured out what whoever it was wanted. When we got close enough, we noticed that the guy, a big dude in his 40s, easily 6 feet 6 inches with a giant beer belly, was hunched over by the front door. My dad is a teacher in a tiny town, so it wasn't a surprise that he recognized the guy. He called out, "Jard, is that you?" Jard turned, didn't acknowledge my dad at all, and hustled back to the passenger side of the mysterious truck, grasping his 10-gallon hat to his head the whole time. He threw himself in head first and, his legs still dangling out the passenger door, yelled for the driver to go. They peeled out, and we were left staring after them, wildly confused. We noticed later that he'd been trying to unlock the door with a screwdriver, but only succeeded in scraping up the door frame before we caught him. The best part? The door was unlocked the entire time. A couple I know heard the glass on their door break and the wife ran to check it out. A guy had smashed his hand through and was trying to unlock the door. She screamed to her husband, "Get the gun." They didn't have a gun, but it scared the guy enough to run off, bleeding profusely. He ran a few doors down and asked for help. They offered to call an ambulance, and he was trying to talk them out of it, so they called the police. The guy got a friend to pick him up and take him to hospital in the next city over. Doctors then knew straight away that it was the guy the police were looking for, and he was arrested. When I was 17, I had a black powder rifle. I actually still have it. I was cleaning it in the basement, put it together, and took it upstairs for storage. While I was upstairs, I heard someone coming through the basement garage door. I thought it was my brother or mom coming home, but when I opened the door to the basement, I saw some random old guy coming up the steps. Edit, old in the context of how he looked to me at the age of 17. In hindsight, he was probably in his mid to late 40s, early 50s. I asked him what he wanted, and he asked if I was home alone. I grabbed my rifle empty and pointed it at him, telling him he needs to leave the way he came in. When he got back to the bottom of the stairs, he unlocked the door he came in through. It didn't register with me until later that he had locked the door behind him when he entered the house. I was 12 years old, hanging out with my dad watching a movie at around 1 AM. All of a sudden there is pounding on the door. My dad gets up and twists the knob. As soon as he does, the door flies open and a mountain of a man throws the door up. My dad is pretty big himself, but gets knocked to the floor, but happens to grab the guy's shirt on the way down. They start wrestling and fist fighting in the entrance of our doorway. Him standing at the top of the steps looking down and watching all of this in slow motion. My dad starts screaming to get his shotgun out of his closet. I run upstairs, grab the shotgun, run back to the top of the steps and pump around into the chamber. Immediately after hearing the sound, the guy tries to run away, but my dad holds him down on the ground. At this time, my neighbors had heard the yelling and scuffle and ran over. They call the police while my dad is holding this guy against the ground and me, a 12-year-old kid, aiming a shotgun at the back of this dude's head. The police end up coming with their guns drawn, and I put the shotgun on the sidewalk. The guy ends up getting arrested and supposedly had just gotten out of jail for a strong-arm robbery and battery. I can't even imagine what would have happened if I had been alone, considering my dad has worked third shift my entire life, but it just happened on one of his nights off. My dad was literally a superhero to me after that day. Edit, so to address the question of why my dad answered the door at 1 AM. This is because we live in a pretty safe area and we have neighbors who drop by sometimes. My dad had thought maybe a neighbor was drunk and wanted to come and visit. This happens from time to time. The last thing we ever would expect is someone to try and force their way in. Another note: I don't care about the correct way to say all the suds, so there's that. I was home alone on a Saturday night and my roommate had left for the weekend. We often left the side door unlocked for friends who would go downstairs and crash on the couch. I would frequently hear it as they would come in. So I'm laying in bed in my birthday suit reading a book at 2 AM and I hear the screen door up. My dog perks up at the noise. Has a 110-pound shepherd Newfie mix that looks like a wolf. He lets out a little boof. Leaning forward in bed I can see the doorway. I look and see the door knob turning. Hello. I shout, thinking it was a friend. It was not a friend. A strange man's head poked through the door. We make eye contact. He has this weird look on his face as he proceeds into the landing. A wrong house. I screamed, thinking he was just in the wrong home. When I screamed, my dog got up and went to my bedroom doorway. The guy stopped in his tracks. My dog's hackles raised and he started snarling. I was even scared by him a bit. The guy stopped when he saw my dog and started backing up. Get the fuck out of my house. I screamed. My dog jumped. The guy fell backwards into the door and my dog grabbed him by the leg and shook him like a rag doll. I stopped caring about being naked at this point. I jumped out of bed and threw on my housecoat while this guy was screaming bloody murder. Blood all over the floor. I grabbed my dog's back leg and sat down on the floor trying to hold on to him. The guy stumbled to his feet and grabbed the door knob before looking back. He took a glance at me with my robe hanging open and my dog still snarling at him. I will let him go. I screamed again. My dog jumped and I did my best to hold on, but one leg got out of my grasp and he lunged at the guy. The guy finally turned and fell out of the door. I immediately got up and locked it. There's blood all over my floor. My dog's fur is still raised as he stands at the door growling. I called the police. They came, took a statement and left. I never found out what happened to the guy. I took my dog to the vet and he was fine. I never left the side door unlocked again. I've never been so thankful for my dog. Here's backs to the hero. https://imga.com/a/mjo3mgx. One morning when I was about 10 or 11, my mom and I were eating breakfast at our kitchen table, which was in direct view of the back door. All of a sudden two guys show up and try to break open the back door. One of them was probably in his 40s or 50s and the other guy looked like he was in his 20s or 30s. Then they looked up and saw that someone was home, so they ran for it. We ran outside to try and get their license plate number, but by then they were already gone. I was 14 and home alone. We were living in a crappy part of nowhere in Knoxville, Tennessee at the time. Someone drove up and knocked on our sliding glass door. I was nervous, but I stayed silent. Then they tried to force the door open, but it was held shut with a pole, so they gave up and drove away. I figured that was the end of it. Shortly thereafter, they came back. I heard the sound of someone pressing against the exterior wall. It was them cutting the phone lines to our security system and the alarm speaker. By then I was on the phone with 911 informing them what was happening. Heavy thudding started to come from the front door as someone bashed it in, breaking the deadbolt. I was terrified and pleaded with 911 to please get someone out here right away. Whoever it was must have heard me talking on the phone, because they immediately left. Although the front door was broken and wide up, it took the cops another 20 minutes to arrive. The person who broke in the door must have cut himself doing it, because our porch had droplets of blood on it. My dad screamed at me for not getting a license plate number while I cried. The people who broke in were never caught, and I've never felt safe anywhere since. I had nightmares for a long time. Edit. I want to say thank you to all the people who correctly pointed out that my father's an asshole. I know some people suggested that he was just acting out of fear and that maybe he wasn't so bad otherwise. Unfortunately, no. My dad is a horrible person. He's extremely abusive and his reaction to everything is screaming. He used to have our phone line tapped just so if anyone said anything he didn't like, he could punish us later. I spent my entire childhood getting to hear about how I'm worthless and ugly and a waste of space. I moved away from him as soon as I could when I was 17. Growing up there was a bad homeless and gang problem in my neighborhood, so many times my cousin and I had to use baseball bats, knives, and BB guns to scare off homeless people trying to break into people's houses. They would walk around and try to open car and house doors, break into windows, and do all kinds of crazy shit, and we would tell my little sister and brother to go inside. I have caught a few in my backyard a couple of times too. This my mother's little story of our drug addicted neighbors, so not me. My mother heard someone walking about upstairs and immediately she takes me and my brother out and puts us in the car. I was like 3 if that. Then she goes back in upstairs and finds the neighbor filling her pockets and generally browsing through her stuff like you would do at a mall. My mother then beats the shit out of her so badly that the junkie went to the police herself out of fear. No damage, no broken windows or doors and nothing taken obviously. Just a lesson learned. Don't break into the home of an angry mother. My mom was outside mowing in the middle of the day and I heard the phone ring. I ran downstairs to try to answer it, missed it, but then saw a tall man stand up in the back room out of the corner of my eye. I was a little kid, so don't ask me what I was thinking, but I went to guide him to that front door to get out of our house. My mom walks in from that back door, the guy runs up the stairs, and she immediately can tell from the look on my face that someone is inside. She grabbed a butcher knife and began chasing him around the house. The guy must have been high. He was so scared he was begging her not to hurt him. He ended up getting away, but not before my mom cut him because she was trying to hold on to him until the police arrived. Whether or not this was an attempted murder is up for debate. It was 1 AM and I was home from college. My brother was a senior in high school asleep in his room, my mom in her bedroom. I heard the utility door to the back of the garage struggle to slowly open, so I assumed my brother was trying to sneak out. I texted him, got no response. I then heard the door shut. I left my bedroom and went to his to see if he had left, but he was asleep in his bed. I walked up to the bed and said, "Wake up, someone is in the house." It was weird because I was the only one awake hearing these things and I didn't have much time to process it, but I just knew something was off. Then I went to my mom's bedroom and said, "Wake up, someone is in the house. Call the neighbors and 911. She freaked out of course and called. I grabbed a baseball bat I kept by my bed and went downstairs alone. Stupid as hell, but adrenaline I guess. I walked through our big house in the dark alone and heard tripping or shuffling coming from the room that leads to the garage. I was hitting the walls and doors yelling who is there as I got closer in hopes of scaring whoever it was away. Once I was about 6 to 10 feet from the room I slammed the bat on the door to the room and yelled again for the person to leave. I heard a crash and the outside door slam. I flipped on the light and no one was there. I went back upstairs to my mom and brother. The police were on the way. When they arrived they brought dogs and also found prying marks on the outside door. A couple blocks down the road my addict, schizophrenic dad was arrested, leaving the direction of our house and intoxicated. He has always owned weapons and has left threatening messages for us before, but never anything like that. I have no proof it was him and no proof he was coming to kill or hurt us, but I had a gut feeling immediately something very dark was in that house. There was a guy hanging around my apartment complex for at least 5 hours claiming to have been waiting for someone. At night my husband went out to walk our dog and I was in the bathroom. He realized he didn't lock the door and remembered that guy, turned back after only a minute and found the guy in the process of opening our door. My husband is 64 and my dog is a 65-pound bull terrier. My husband started yelling, but what I saw scare the shit out of him the most was my dog trying to take him down. Never saw that guy again. Last year I was staying in a duplex in the shooteast part of town. I was home alone and someone knocked on the front door. I thought it was my husband coming home from work early, so I excitedly opened the door, only to see it was a man who I've never seen before. I closed the door halfway and asked if I could help him. He didn't say anything and barged in my living room. I ran to my bedroom and tried to lock the door, but I wasn't fast or strong enough. He cornered me and pulled out a knife and told me not to move. He saw some money I had on my computer desk and grabbed that. I told him he could take whatever, but just hurry and leave. He just kept telling me to shut up. Finally he held the knife to my neck and told me he was going to have sex with me and to get on my bed. I knew I wasn't strong enough to fight him off, so I tried to lighten the situation by laughing and saying he didn't need the knife and he'd just do whatever he wanted. He kept saying, "Get on the bed," over and over. I got on the bed and he started to unbutton my pants. I was holding my hands up to show I wasn't going to do anything. Then as he looked down I reached for my doorbell that was on my bedside table. I had just replaced the battery and hadn't put it back outside yet and pressed the button making the chime go off. He freaked out and ran outside. I immediately ran up and locked my front door and called 911 my husband. I never got a good look at him as he was wearing a zipped up hoodie and it was dark. Everything just happened so fast. There were no witnesses and he was never caught. I still have trouble being home alone without having a panic attack, and I always lock my door and have weapons hidden all over the house. I've moved since then to a much better area, so that's helped a bit. Not my home, but neighbor's property. Lived on the border between the hood and a college campus in a major Midwestern city. Gated apartment community. Supposedly upscale according to the brochure. Had glass shatter outside, then again, etc. Walked outside and see a car creeping between the parked cars in the lot and a guy going car to car, ripping out the center consoles and tossing them behind each car near the creeping car. I have a very deep voice, so I yelled, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" I see a couple guys pop out from behind the cars and run like hell to the creeper car, then scream out of the parking lot, right through the closed gate. Mission accomplished. Went around picking up people's stereos and consoles and bringing them into my unit, then writing notes for each car with my phone number to return their belongings. Those assholes managed to hit 5 cars in that short amount of time. Police didn't even bother to come when I reported it. We can't send out a unit unless the owner of the property calls it in. WTF. I caught 4 very stupid teenagers going through my car in my driveway at 2 morning. What was stupid is I was looking right at them through my massive living room window with the light on. You'd have to be blind not to see me, but I guess they were too preoccupied with my personal property. So I grabbed the old break action 12 gauge I hung on the wall as a decoration. I didn't even have shells for it, let alone would I have ever shot it. I then ran out my front door and began yelling like a madman in my pajamas, waving this old gun in the air. They dropped everything and ran like hell. I defended my property, but in reality I should have just called the cops. I was lucky they didn't have a weapon. One of my first apartments was on the ground level, with a patio off the living room, that I lived in with my now ex-boyfriend, T. T had a full-time job and fairly good income at 21 years old, had a lot of somewhat expensive toys and some shady friends. He would often go out of state to visit family and friends on the weekend, and I would stay behind to work. One weekend night, when T was out of town, one of his friends I had only met a few times knocked on our patio door. He seemed really scattered, was looking for T, and trying to see past me into the apartment, but since T wasn't home, and I didn't know him very well, I wouldn't let him in, and he eventually left. A couple nights later, T and I were in the living playing video games, and heard a knock on the patio door. It was the same friend, but this time he brought someone with. Both were dressed in hoodies with bandanas covering their faces, and were carrying large bags. They demanded the video game consoles and a few other things, but when he refused they started fighting. I grabbed my phone and tried to run for the hallway, but the friend chased me and grabbed me. He got my phone, but I was able to elbow him and kick him to get away, and ran into the hall and started yelling for help. One of my neighbors called the police. I'm still not sure exactly what happened while I was in the hall, but either 2 guys didn't actually get anything, but they did smash his TV before running. Since T knew one of the guys and was familiar with the car he drove, the police were able to find the car fairly quickly with the bandanas and bags. We had to follow up as witnesses, but the 2 guys ended up confessing and spent a year in jail.